Welcome to Leading for Life Stories Season 4. I'm Bob Judson. I'm the host for this podcast, and thank you very, very much indeed for joining me. Whether you're a new joiner or a seasoned listener, then I really, really hope you enjoy the mix of content that we provide. The personal stories, the thematic episodes, and of course, the fantastic guest interviews. If you've been with me since the beginning, then I'm enormously grateful for your loyalty and thank you so much. If you're relatively new to the show, then I really hope you like it, and I hope you find all of it interesting and some of it hopefully useful to you. Please subscribe on whichever channel it is you're using, whether it's YouTube, whether it's a podcast platform. That really helps us boost the show and get it over the hills on the algorithms. So if you can do that for me, I would be enormously grateful. But without further ado, let's go. Welcome back, everybody. My guest this week is Dr. Liz Feigin. Liz and I met when she was actually part of a panel to the Leaders Club, which I obviously am deputy CEO of. I support very, very regularly. And she was talking in Deloitte with a wider panel of participants, really around the topic of Gen Z and working with Gen Z, or intergenerational working more broadly. And I thought she would be a really interesting guest to have on the podcast. And boy, was I right. I mean, she's got the most fascinating background. I'm not going to steal her thunder. I'll let her talk about it in a little more detail as to what she's done. And we have a kind of most of that as we go through. But we had the most terrific conversation about advice for leaders who are working with youngsters from Gen Z and indeed Millennials, and also advice for the youngsters themselves coming into the workplace and what they're facing. And there's a huge amount of challenge around this. It's one of the things that crops up all the time when I do training with Deloitte University and others that I think leaders are having to grapple with. So it couldn't be more appropriate as a conversation for us to have on the podcast. And I think you'll find Liz's insights absolutely fascinating. So without further ado, off we go. Liz, welcome to the podcast. Fantastic to have you on. I really think this is going to be such a topical and interesting conversation. Can't wait to get started.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. I mean, you've obviously got a lot of career time ahead of you. But when I look at your profile, it's remarkable what you've already achieved. And as a psychologist, you're working in such an interesting set of areas that so many people talk about and are so relevant to today's business leaders. But just to kind of get us started, could you just give us a bit of a career summary so far of your journey, as it were?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been quite unusual, I suppose, and unique. My original studies in Cambridge for my undergrad and my master's were in education and psychology. I always had an interest. Education isn't teaching per se, but it's the way that we learn from the world around us, the way that we build knowledge and help other people build their knowledge. So I studied a joint honours multidisciplinary course thinking about the psychology, sociology, history, philosophy of education. Found it fascinating. And I ended up specialising in the psychology of education, and my master's went on for psychology and education. And I went on to do my doctorate, but at the same time, I taught in a school, and I did my teacher qualification. So for me, I've always kind of been teaching and learning and working in psychology at the same time. At some point, I pulled out of conventional teaching and moved much more into the psychology side of things, probably at some point through my doctorate. And at one time, I was working in prison, and I had a particularly rough day with one of my guys there who he had behaved in a very violent way, and so ended up in solitary confinement, where, long story short, I ended up having a therapy session there, which was a really, really difficult experience. It was a difficult day in prison that day. I came home, and at the end of the day, somebody came round who happened to be the CEO of a company, and he just sat down and said, "Oh, I've had such a hard day." So I said, "What's been so hard about your day?" They said, "I've got all these young people to deal with, and they've been so difficult." I said, "Oh, what's so difficult about your young people you're working with?" said they're always late. I had to send one home to shave because we got a client meeting and he looked a mess. I had to send someone else out, send someone else home to change their shoes because they looked a mess. I got someone else who wants a sabbatical. They've only been here 6 months. And I keep investing in all this training and they keep leaving. And it's costing me so much money. I don't know what to do with them all. Nothing's working. So I said, oh, have you tried phrasing it like this or put it like that and have a conversation like that? And he said to me, Elizabeth, you don't understand how difficult these young people are. I just looked at him. It's like, a little bit. I do actually. I work with young people, difficult young people, but really difficult young people for a living. And that is my specialty, difficult young people. He said, if you're so smart, come run a workshop for my managers and tell them what to do. So I went to talk to the exco, and I think we were all I put together all the skills I'd learned of engaging young, diverse people who were quite challenging and disengaged, not like disengaged from work, disengaged from life and the law and everything else. And we were all surprised that because they were so clever and so smart and had been so well trained technically, but hadn't had any training on humans and the brain and how to lead humans and how to get the most out of people and how to communicate optimally. And from there, I kind of built a very organic course according to what they needed. And through word of mouth, I ended up working in a whole cross section of industries, from fashion. One of my earliest clients was ASOS, for example, to work quite a lot with law firms, asset management, hedge funds, now private equity, the police, hospitality, groceries. And I'm not necessarily good at any of those skill sets, but the commonality between them all is humans. Essentially, humans are humans are humans, whatever industry they're in, wherever they sit, wherever they work. It's the same stuff beneath the surface that gets us going, that makes us tick, and that shuts us down. And so I guide businesses in how to optimize potential across the board, from the youngest talent to board level, with workshops, performance coaching, consultancy. I mean, that's how I've kind of developed from where I started to where I am working with businesses. But I still very much do work in clinic over in Harley Street as a therapist. And I really enjoy as well working with many schools in terms of mental health preventative education as well. So I've kind of got my feet on the ground with the young people in real terms. So I can see what's coming with Gen Alpha arriving soon.
Yeah, well, that's true, and that's the next thing, isn't it? I mean, I think we're going to talk a lot more about this whole young people thing because that's clearly a major strand of this. But I mean, I said you had a fascinating career. No kidding, right? I mean, it's just amazing what you've already packed in to to your life. I mean, quite extraordinary. Just winding it back slightly before we go kind of forward again. Early motivations. I mean, what got you into that whole education space in the first place? And when you look back at your kind of upbringing.
It's a really good question. I often wonder that. And I often think about all of these things I do. My weeks are so diverse. And I think, what pulls it all together? Where is my real passion? And I think where I'm at right now is my real passion is optimizing potential, bridging the gap from where people are to where they could be. And I think that there is so much potential in every human. I'm a real optimist when it comes to humans. I believe in them. And whether that's in my clinic room, that's in a business, if that's in a coaching room, I believe in people. And I think that we have so many frameworks in society that can stop us becoming, reaching our potential, voices telling us we can't, limiting beliefs surrounding us. It's exacerbated by social media today. Just these voices whispering, you're not good enough, you can't, what's everyone thinking? And I suppose I really like empowering people to challenge that voice and to say, but what if you could? Actually, what if that voice exists inside your head because it was planted there when you were really young from something that's no longer relevant? Maybe from a family member or a parent or a life experience, and it's actually not relevant. Maybe actually you can. Maybe you could rewrite your story. And I think one of the biggest passions for me is working with people and seeing them transform from where they are to where they could be. And that's what I do across the board.
Yeah, fascinating. No, I mean, interesting. I think the way your brain is wired, it's the sort of chimp paradox thing, isn't it? Where there's some controlling your own thoughts and emotions, and managing, the way I guess you process stuff, and then the way you respond to things is such an important feature of all of that. And I mean, going back to something you said a minute ago, I think that the challenge for leaders, and one of the reasons I do what I do in terms of leadership training, is so often it is absolutely true. You don't get any training at all to deal with people. You're good at what you do, and you're trained to do what you do, and you're promoted based on your performance in what you do in most organizations. And then suddenly you find yourself running a group of people, and you haven't got any kind of skills to do that. And I think that's been exacerbated with this whole intergenerational working piece. I mean, amusingly, when I talk a lot at Deloitte, for example, at Deloitte University, when it always crops up, this issue of Gen Z, particularly, that middle management, who I'm probably dealing with the most, somewhere in the age bracket, late 20s to mid 40s, senior managers and directors, that they find all sorts of reasons to turn around and be quite critical about Gen Z. But I said I would be willing to bet that when I was 18 and joining the workforce, that actually the people well above me in generational terms were looking at me going and saying exactly the same things. So it's not like we were, they don't do this, they don't do that, they're not very good at this. And so I do think there's an element of that plays into it. And you get this criticism constantly about, they're lazy, they're entitled, they're work shy, they're not, willing to kind of stick at stuff, they move jobs all the time, blah, 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 the sort of stuff you were raising a minute ago. Yet on the other side of that, what I see from people quite often is, but they're very values driven, and they actually are really focused on kind of pushing us in a different direction with some things. I mean, not least things like sustainability, because they've got a vested interest in that, obviously. I'm just interested in your kind of take on what you see with all the different companies you get, the kind of conversations that you're having in that space. How true is it that they are different? And, is it just a kind of perception rather than reality? All of that kind of stuff. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, everything you say is really interesting, and it comes up the whole time. I want to address, I guess, a couple of things that you said. So I think you're right. There have always been more seasoned generations, shall we say, having a moan about the younger generations. I think, though,
More
today,
seasoned. I love it.
more
I'm
seasoned.
definitely more seasoned.
That's my diplomatic way of saying older. But I think that they have always had a moan about the younger generations. But I think the reason this has become a critical business issue is because it used to be that if you were young talent, you didn't like where you're working, you're having a moan, your boss is annoying you, but you stuck it out and you stayed. Now what's happening is young people leave. So I'm not happy. I don't like the way my boss does X, Y, or Z. I'm out. And that is costing businesses a lot of money. That's the reality. Our business frameworks are still set up to reward loyalty in terms of time spent at a company, and loyalty just doesn't look like that anymore. People, attrition rates are much higher, staff turnover is much higher, and so it's become business issue because it is costing businesses so much money. So you might complain about them, and they might complain about you, but then they leave, and so that's why I find businesses start to take this conversation seriously. In terms of the second part of what you were saying about these, the complaints made, is there truth in it? Yeah, yes and no. I think, humans, we're complex people. We don't fit into check boxes. We don't fit into spreadsheets. My husband works in finance. I'm telling him the whole time, humans don't fit into spreadsheets. We're more spectrum people. We live in so many different types of spectrums. Our feelings, our brains, our well-being. I think that there are definitely commonalities across humans, and those are the areas that I work on. I think there are things that motivate us, that we respond to, that we're all looking for, that we're all seeking out. And then I do think there are things that really do differentiate us. Obviously, not everybody, there are exceptions, but we definitely see a difference in terms of what turning up looks like, what showing up looks like physically and emotionally, from dress code to attitude, to communication styles, response rates, to the ability to do difficult things, stick things out, wanting to enjoy the experience along the way, or being happy to kind of work, and then enjoy a few weeks off. There are definitely significant differences, but I think there's enough commonality that we can bridge those gaps if we understand each other better and we develop the right tools.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Just picking up on one thing you said in there about the sort of non-sticky nature of people in jobs and loyalty. I mean, yes, obviously the business impact is acute from that, where people are moving on and they're that's challenging, to put it mildly, for a lot of businesses where they're not keeping people. What do you think the impact is for the young people though? Because I mean, I have a view on this. I'll kind of put my colors, nail my colors to the mast, I suppose, to start with. That you know you can do that, of course, if you need to move jobs, and people do move jobs regularly. But at the same time, the world that we live in will change over time, I'm sure, but relatively slowly. And currently, there is a real feeling that experience counts. And if you're moving constantly, even if you're moving within the same industry, but you look very not sticky, and your CV looks, it's got more spots than a Dalmatian dog in terms of different appointments over a very relatively short period of time, is that good for them? I mean, I struggle to think that it is. I would imagine it must be quite challenging if you're it's all very well being multifaceted in your career, but too much multifacet equals not enough experience and depth.
I think there's a difference between multifaceted and jumping between things and not staying with things. I'm gonna again answer that from two angles. I would say, on the one hand, if we think about showing up, turning up, and being able to stick with doing difficult things, we are seeing a gap in that sort of mental strength and resilience in some of the younger cohort coming through. And I don't say that as a sweeping statement or a judgment. I say that if you look at the statistics when it comes to mental health, well, if you look at the statistics of school attendance, EBSA, emotional based school avoidance, has become a pandemic across schools. The ability for children to turn up and show up for school is becoming really, really difficult for them to do. When we think about that absenteeism when it comes to workplaces, again, we're seeing gaps in people being able to come to work and do difficult things. It's not easy. Work's not meant to be easy. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be standards of acceptable behaviors and everything else. I don't think one thing mitigates the other. But the ability to stick with things is changing. And I do think we need to think about technology and social media for a lot of that. It used to be that, let's say you've got a 3-year-old and you'd give them a jigsaw puzzle, and they'd need to build that jigsaw puzzle. That's really hard, doing a puzzle. And maybe they get some pieces together and then it breaks, and then they cry, and then they calm down, and then they try again, and then they're nearly there, and then their sibling comes and ruins it, and then they have a meltdown, and then they calm down, then they try again, and then they nearly do it, but now they've lost a piece, and then, they have a tantrum, and then they go to bed because they're overtired, and then they try again tomorrow, then they find the piece. Now let's say it takes 3 days, and now they can do the puzzle. And they feel really good. And they've got a good, healthy, sustainable sense of dopamine from that. They've built motor skills, they developed concentration, they developed focus, they've learned how to get reward and gratification from a long-term investment when they were 3, and their brains are really malleable. That's really good for them. Nowadays, you give a kid an iPad when they're 3. They press a button and the screen does this dopamine party that's as if you've been to a casino or done drugs in their brains. Now, why are they going to want to sit and do a jigsaw puzzle after that?
Mm.
That level of dopamine that comes so fast. Now, the way dopamine works is it hits really, really high, but it's like a seesaw. So however high you get, you then dip that low, and you then have this desperate need to get back up there again. Now, no jigsaw puzzle or colouring book is getting you there. Neither is playing an instrument or doing an essay. The only way of getting back up there is more social media. And eventually, as kids get older, that can become other sorts of really dopamine heavy, unhealthy habits, whether that's explicit media or drugs or alcohol, promiscuity, all these sorts of things. So we've got a bit of an issue and a lag, I'd say, in the brain development of being able to stick with really difficult things and get very long-term sustainable dopamine because we're living in an environment that is just one big dopamine land party. So if you think about your question of job hopping, for me, I like to look beneath the surface of the psychology, what's going on. As you said, there's sometimes a very appropriate need to move jobs. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, but the brains are less accustomed to staying with one thing. Brains are more accustomed to moving about and needing change and needing dopamine in those sorts of ways. And I think that if businesses don't want that, they need to be thinking about what are they doing to retain staff that's different to how they used to, because brains are different. I was talking to my teenage son about this in one of our ongoing debates about his social media use. I didn't allow Snapchat, I'm the meanest mom, and I don't. And I was explaining to him about dopamine. He's like, I don't understand. Why don't teachers then just give us classes that give dopamine for our brains? Then we'd all be able to concentrate more. And I that is a really good point, and I think now to engage young people, I was talking to a tech expert about this, about EBSA, emotional based school avoidance. It's like, but we could gamify attendance. When we need to start thinking about their brains are different. It's not a choice to be difficult. Brains have been made differently. Brains are very squishy and malleable, and they're being formed differently at the moment. And it's going to be exacerbated, I think, until regulation catches up. On the flip side of that, though, I'm not saying whether this is right, wrong, good, bad at this point, because I think that's more nuanced. I'm just saying that's how it is without a judgment value to it, because I think that's how we can be productive about it. I obviously don't think all of it is very healthy and very helpful, hence why I have so many arguments with my teenager about his screen use. I don't think it's great for brain development. On the other side of that, though, if you think about the pace that the economy, the industries, jobs, businesses are going to have to change at over the next couple of decades, the chances are leaders now are the last cohort of leaders who are probably leading all human teams. Many of the jobs that people are currently now applying for are not going to exist in the next decade. So the ability to actually shift and change quickly, I think, is going to be massively needed for the future of work. If you think about evolution, it's those that survive over time are those that are adaptable. So I think that I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but there is something about this ability to endure change, to end one thing, start a new thing, because that is what the times are asking of you. So I think it's complex, like all things human. And I think it's important to be holding these things in mind. We do want to encourage the ability to build mental strength, do difficult things under pressure, which I run an increasing amount of training on at all levels. But we don't want to stunt the ability to change quickly and be adaptable, because that's going to be needed. So it's a bit of a long answer, but that's the detail to what I think about that.
No, it's a brilliant answer. I mean, so many different elements of that really strike a chord. I mean, I think the whole idea, and someone said to me a long time ago, and I think it's totally true, that particularly kids, you've got a very plastic brain, you're very, very flexible. You see that with things like language skills. When I was in the military, I know, lots of people, we have a scheme where you go and do exchange tours. Some of the time you go and work with a different air force in a different country. And the people that did that with kids, their kids would, invariably come back kind of bilingual completely in whatever that language was. Whereas the adults, yes, they got pretty good at it, but then they're never quite at that level. They're never kind of almost native proficiency in terms of of the language skills. So you absolutely see that. Is it something that's physically changed in terms of brain development as a result of technology that's here now then that's caused this, or what has happened that's made it different now?
There has been, listen, research is coming through because this is all very much live, right? Like the millennials were introduced to social media probably more in adolescence. Gen Z were introduced to tech and social media younger, but it was nothing like, 3-year-olds on iPads type of thing, but it might have been access to all these things younger, but it wasn't the you didn't go to a restaurant and basically, they were still giving out coloring books instead of everyone, the adults talking and the kids just watching a phone. That is, so it's difficult to collect research when it's all live. But what we have seen is a lag in the development of motor skills and physical development in particular. And that has been linked to screen use and tech use because children are moving less. The brain will always take the easiest option. So if there's an option to sit and watch TV versus go outside and run around, even though going outside and running around is much healthier and more sustainable form of dopamine, the brain will choose the easier option, which is essentially minimal input, maximum output. And the TV programs created for little people are so dopamine heavy, are so exciting for the brain. It's so difficult to pull away from, to go and have a run around outside. And it's really difficult to be a parent in that situation because parents will know if you say, I'm going to turn off Coco Melon now, everyone needs to go outside or everyone needs to go do some colouring, then you have to basically be ready for a world war with your toddler, and then as they get older, if you say to a teenager, can you turn off your PlayStation and go learn piano or do your homework? I mean, then you've got a war with a teenager. I don't know what's worse, toddler or teenagers, but it's not easy when you are up against an economy where it's our kids' attention is their product.
No, I totally get that.
It is an attention economy and they're winning. And then people come to work and brains have not been developed in the same way. So many university courses even are online. You can do degrees in great universities from bed. And then the expectation that now that young person needs to come to work, get dressed, be on time, have face-to-face communication with adults, give feedback, receive feedback, answer the phone. I'm not saying those are unreasonable. I'm just saying that who's to say these kids have that skill set? Who taught them? Because schools aren't necessarily doing it, universities aren't necessarily doing it, and parents aren't necessarily doing it. So where are they learning this?
Fascinating. I mean, we'll get into the work bit of this on both sides, the young people and the leaders in a minute, because I think it'd be great to get your advice and thoughts on that. But just before that, I mean, as we record this, there's a very lively debate here in the UK about banning children on social media, less than 16. Australia's just tried to do that. I mean, they have done it. I think we'll see how successful it is. You're talking more broadly than social media, though. You're talking about everything's on screens and TVs and all the rest of it. Where do you kind of stand with this? Do you think there is a genuine merit in going a bit revisionist and going back to kind of old school stuff, or is that toothpaste out of the tube and there's no way back?
I don't think that there is a way back to where we were. I don't think that would be healthy because if we don't acknowledge that this is part of life, we can't prepare our kids for it when they hit whatever age they're introduced to it. So at the end of the day, if you ban it for under 16s, once they turn 16, they are going online. So I'm not saying that it's the wrong decision because their brains are that much more developed, but I don't think that that's a good enough answer because the question is what are you doing from age of birth until 16 to make sure those kids are ready for that? Because it hits you either way. Yes, your brain is more developed, and so you'd hope it's had time to stabilize before it's exposed to this. But I think that we need to think about how do we teach young people to differentiate fantasy from reality, how to build those inner voices of adequacy and not need validation from, thousands of people I don't know liking my post. How do we teach the ability how to focus and to concentrate without screen? So I don't think we can pretend it doesn't exist. I do think we need to see a massive shift. If you think about where we were at a decade ago, it was considered, amazing for schools, and private schools were all aiming for like an iPad a child. And I do think where we're at now, people are realizing, young, you don't need an iPad, a child. We need to develop other skill sets other than how to use an iPad. They'll learn that really fast. And so, we're seeing, I think, I saw Eton didn't allow smartphones. They've gone back to these old brick Nokias. And it's just, I don't think that we can eradicate it and pretend it doesn't exist, because it does, and it's too big for that, and it is the future. I think we need to teach young people how to um, leverage it to their advantage. Beth, my colleague, she always says technology is a wonderful slave and a terrible master. And I think that's true. If you can learn to use it in a way that it serves you, then great. But that's a skill, to not let it take over and you end up serving it.
No, that's a great answer. I think I tend to agree with you on the banning it thing. I think it's a bit like when you're absolutist about any of this stuff. I mean, another example for me would be alcohol, where you turn around and say, right, okay, you cannot drink legally until you're 18. And I'm not saying we should change that, but I think there is a realistic need for parents to bring children up understanding, right, these are the circumstances around where it's appropriate, and but alcohol adds to or subtracts from your behavior, so that when you turn 18 you don't suddenly go bananas and really go off the deep end on it. I think the same thing's true, probably more so with technology, because you want people to be digital natives in tomorrow's world with, as you say, AI increasing, all that sort of stuff. So you need them to have the skills, but it's then management of it. And I do think, I mean, I see it, I mean, pretty much everyone sees it, I'm sure, these days, that the quick way to keep your children quiet is to turn around and give them the iPad or the iPhone kind of thing.
Yeah,
If they
yeah, it is.
and there is a risk that becomes too sort of systemic in terms of the way we're doing it, and it does lead to challenges later on. Let's jump onward though, because I think the workplace stuff is of real interest to me in terms of where we're going. I mean, I recognize a lot of what you're saying about the skills development, or perhaps lack of skills development in some areas, social skills particularly, which I think in a world where we're increasingly seeing hybrid working is inevitably going to be a bit of a consequence. You haven't got people mingling in bigger groups. You haven't got, they're not socializing in the way that they used to. And even if I look back 20 years ago when I was running an RAF base, I used to regularly have to talk to my officers at social gatherings where we were there with a bunch of people external to the base, and say, look, guys, your job is to actually go and talk to the people that we've invited here as guests, not talk to each other, and get that kind of broader engagement, networking, small talk kind of skill into you to be developed. So I don't think it's a completely new thing. I think it's definitely got a bit more challenging. And that is certainly something I see with the training I do as well. I'd be really interested in your two aspects of your advice. The first one is when you're doing workshops and so on with more senior people, what are you advising them about how to engage, behave, get the best out of the young people they've got? How do they fix some of these challenges that we're seeing? What's the solution?
So I think that, obviously I spend hours or days talking about it, but if I were to pull out a few of the key things, I'd say understanding is everything. Nobody wants to do a mediocre job at stuff. And no one wants to disappoint. No one wants to not do a really good job. No one wants to not make their boss or their seniors proud. No one wants that. Everybody wants to do well. Everyone wants to feel that they've done a great job. So I think if somebody is not performing to a level that you are wanting them to perform, then we need to start on the premise that might not be a choice. They might not be doing this because they want to make you angry. They want to ruin your day. They want you to be working harder. They want to disappoint you. They're entitled and they've chosen this. So I think we need to first remove ourselves from judgment and assumptions as best we can, and just have an open mind and try to think about what are the disruptors here. So we've got performance, we've got potential. What has disrupted the bridge between this potential reaching the performance level that I need? Not to assume it's because that person is bad, but to be authentically curious, I call it, which is when you are curious and you really don't think you know the answer yet. Because very often we're curious, but we've already decided the answer in our heads. So authentic curiosity is being able to say, right, this person has the potential because I recruited them. This is where I need them to be, and they're not. They can't be happy with that. I'm not happy with that. And I'd say the biggest two tools that I would use, the first thing is curiosity. There are three things actually. The first is curiosity, authentic curiosity, be curious. So for example, I um need you in the office by 9 or by 8:30. And what I've been noticing is, so say what you've noticed. What I've been noticing is that every day you've been arriving at 8:40. And I'm just curious about what is going on there. Now, it might be you already know what's going on. There are train delays. Oh, yeah, we also have train delays. Okay, and I'm just, I'm curious about what we can do to mitigate these train delays since they're happening every day. I'll leave earlier. Great. Okay, so wondering how you're going to manage that. Well, I'm really tired. Okay, so go to bed earlier. Okay. Now, you can have that whole conversation through curiosity without being confrontational, saying you're late, it's not acceptable, you need to get up earlier, there are delays every day. Then you're ranting and you're venting. And that is not leadership. Take that somewhere else. Leadership is being authentically curious about what has gone on. And if you do that, that person will arrive at the solution itself, themselves. They will. They're smart people. And then what you do is you collaborate. Okay, thanks so much for helping me understand, summarize what's going on, reset your expectations. So listen, what I'm going to need going forward is you here by 8:30. So let's check in tomorrow at 8:30. Come to my office and we can check in to see how your new plan went. And collaborate. Do you need any help with this? Do you need any support with this? No, you got it. Okay, cool. Because otherwise it's not going to be sustainable for us. And it's about reasserting your expectations in a collaborative way, as opposed to I say curious, not furious, right? The other thing I would say is really, really important for leaders is to catch the good. So very often what happens is, let's say we're on the theme of punctuality now, is people get really irritated, look at their clock, they'll huff and puff, they're not here, that's every day, and then they talk to them about it, and everyone's chatting, it's really annoying, build up frustration. And what I say is, I would be willing to bet on that person's first day, they were early. On that day, if they got there at an acceptable time, catch the good when people do it. So on the first day, 10 minutes early, just how I like it. And you know what? You're dressed spot on. This professional vibe's what we're going for. Thank you so much. I knew you'd be a great recruit, real asset to the team. Just catch it. Because I will guarantee you that person will arrive early again tomorrow. People love to feel good. They want to be praised. And if you catch the good, it will stop it becoming problematic. So I often talk to leaders, and the thing is, the leaders often, the more seasoned generations, might be that Gen X generation who are really self-sufficient. They are known for being really independent, really self-sufficient, have used to do everything themselves, have multiple caregiving responsibilities, don't necessarily like to talk about their feelings, especially not work, and that's fine. But then I'll say this to them and they'll be like, oh, come on, Liz, isn't that a bit condescending? I've got to start, praising people for coming to work on time. So no, you don't have to. I'm just saying, if this is a recurring problem for you, this might prevent it from deteriorating.
Yeah, you pick up on a point that's related to something I say a lot, which I tend to say to people, that the two most underutilized words in the English language in the same sentence are thank and you. Because I don't think people thank people enough, and they don't do it personally enough. They'll send a sort of generic email out to the team going, hey, well done, we did a great job, blah, blah, blah. But actually, people like personal recognition. They might not like it publicly. Some people love it, some people hate it, but they certainly all like it privately, at least. And and a lot of people just don't do it enough. And I think you're right. I mean, affirming good behavior in that kind of way, and complimenting people when they're doing a good job is really, really important, because it does make them feel good. It's back to
really
you'll tell
important.
me the psychology, but that's probably another kind of dopamine related hit, isn't it? That you're getting that kind of thing.
It does. And if you think about the idea that especially the younger generations are used to so much micro feedback online, you post a picture of lunch and you get, 100 likes from people, like, notification. And then you get to work and it's like you'll get your feedback on a quarterly appraisal or something. That's not really enough feedback for the brain nowadays.
Yeah, yeah.
And people do like to feel good. They like to feel that they belong and they like to feel valued. And that does do something for the brain. In fact, when you don't feel like you belong, it activates the same part of the brain as actual pain. It's the same part, it's a threat. From an evolutionary perspective, you needed to be part of a tribe to survive. So that is where it's wired. So it feels so important for that person. And I'm a big believer in microfeedback. And I think that it can really mitigate when things go wrong. And it can be used instead of confrontation. So, for example, I'll often have, I need something by every morning, Monday morning at 9, every week. If I've got a team of 10, I've got 6 people who get it to me and I've got 4 who don't. And I chase them and I message them and I call them and they just never get it to me. So I say, do it the other way around. Send an email to the whole team, all 10 people, naming the 6 that have sent it on time. Just say, thank you so much to X, Y, and Z who have got this to me by 9. It's made my day so much easier. I'm really grateful. Kind regards. That's it. Don't even comment on the foilie. I'll guarantee you they will get it to you imminently. And next week, they will get it to you on time. But then what you've got to do is send another email and name all of them. Because I always say everyone wants a sticker. Everyone wants to be named. You don't let them do it for you on time and then not name them because they want to be named. They want to be acknowledged. They want to be praised. And if you do that, it can really prevent the chasing and the falling into the parent-teacher mode.
No, I love that. That's a really, really good example, actually. I think because you're right. I mean, everyone wants a sticker. They all want that little gold star, don't they? What about the other way around? I mean, advice for the youngsters themselves. I mean, when you're in that space, what do you know how to show up, particularly when they're heading to work for the first time, or they're in a new organization and they're kind of feeling their way, or they're finding it a bit challenging because their expectations haven't been quite met. What do you think of the top few tips you'd offer for that?
It's a really good question, and I get asked this a lot. Just this week, I got asked, I was on a panel and there were loads of questions, but 2 jumped out at me from Gen Z. One was, what am I meant to do if I've got a recent diagnosis, a neurodivergence diagnosis? So I don't know, it's autism or ADHD, and I get this question a lot. And I've told my manager, they don't even understand what it is. And I've told HR and they also don't really understand what to do about it. What do I do? And then the other question I got was, people always complain about Gen Z having a work-life balance. So what do you think I should do if my day ends at 5, but the work's not finished and I want to go because I've got plans? Like, what am I meant to do? Should I not have a work-life balance? Am I meant to stay in the office? And I thought those were really honest questions. And they represent what I hear a lot. And I think they're really good examples of the source of some frustration. And I would say that the answer to both is the same tools: curiosity and collaboration. Don't go in assuming, the first question about the neurodiversity, I said, don't assume that your boss isn't doing what you need because they don't care. There's a difference between won't and can't. It's not that they won't support you. It's not that they won't care. It's that they probably can't. They don't know how to. This is the first time it's come up. They're not as equipped with the language as you are. They didn't learn about it in school. Less of their peers have these sorts of diagnoses. And so what I would encourage is open communication and collaboration with your leaders. You can educate them about this and they can educate you about what's on offer. And you can come up with outcomes together if neither of you are coming in deciding the other doesn't care. And I'd say it's the same with curiosity and so I guess some empathy there too. The girl that asked about work-life balance and leaving on time, I said, you know what it is? It's people don't mind if you leave at 5. What people mind is if there's a pile of work that needs to be done by tomorrow, you leave at 5, and then who is going to do the work for you? And if you've got a team and they're all leaving at 5 and no one's finished the work, and this is all needed to be reportable by tomorrow, then what happens is your manager ends up sitting there till 1, 2 a.m., finishing off all of your pieces of work. So it's not that anyone's got a problem with you leaving. It comes down to the communication and collaboration of the team that, again, have some empathy. Your leaders are also humans. many of them are going to have families, children, commitments. They're going to miss out on, they're not going to be able to do whatever is needed in their worlds because they're now going to have to finish this work because a deliverable is a deliverable. There's no flexibility there. So it's about communicating, not at 5 when you've got to go, in the middle of the day, and say to whoever, is leading you, say, I just want to share this is where I'm up to. I'm really mindful this is due in for tomorrow. I do have a commitment at 5:30, so I'm going to have to go at 5. Tell me how you want to structure this. Or the commitment today, I could move it for tomorrow if needed, because I don't want to leave you with all of this. But then tomorrow I need to leave at 5, and I'm mindful we've got another deadline the day after. Or is it better I do my commitment, I can pick up on this again at 8 and finish it? Or do you prefer we find someone else to delegate this now? Or do you want me to stop doing something else so I can just focus on this? Or do you want to stop what you're doing so you can support me? There are so many options. And I think what leaders, when they complain, it's coming from an emotional space of like, I have just been lumbered with everyone's unfinished work that's due tomorrow, and everyone's gone off gallivanting to all their activities and appointments. And that doesn't feel thoughtful, and it doesn't feel like a team player. So you can leave at 5, but it's about how you do it. Show curiosity, collaborate, come up with solutions together.
Great advice. I mean, I tend to talk quite a lot about your emotional bank account, if you like, in that space, where essentially, and I tend to do it from a leader's point of view, that if you're expecting the team to do X, then, you need to be kind of there with them and leading by example and so on. And every time you do that, if you're working late, it's a great example where if you're there with them, even if it's just getting the coffee or the pizza, you're there with them showing solidarity, and you're putting, figuratively speaking, money in the emotional bank account, which when you then can't be there, you make a withdrawal from that bank account. The problem is you can't go overdrawn. So if there's no money in the bank account because you never, do that, then you're not in a great place. And I think the same thing from what you've just said is true for workers in this space as well. Actually, if you're making it more by exception than the rule, then actually, and you're being more collaborative in your approach, then that makes an awful lot of sense. And I love that. It's really, really great advice to, for people to think about. Anything else before we jump on?
I was just going to say, because I think you're 100% right, but what I noticed particularly with that Gen X age of leader is because they're so independent and self-sufficient and don't need that sort of validation and naming everything, what they'll often do is invest in that bank account. They'll go overtime, they'll do everything to support their teams, but their teams have no awareness of how much their leaders do for them. And I work with so many leaders who miss out on so much of their own personal life, from holidays to kids' events to sleep. And they've never told their team, guys, I just want you to know I've cancelled this arrangement so I can stay in and support the team on getting this done. So in their heads, they're investing in this bank account, but the young people don't necessarily, as a generalization, not everybody, but don't necessarily realize what's going on because it's not been named. So I think a part of leadership is to do as you're saying, but to name it while you're doing it so that people can see and recognize the investment that's going into them.
That's a terrific point. I totally agree. I've not thought about it from that point of view, to be honest. I think you're absolutely right, though. If I think about the amount of times I've probably done exactly that, not really called it out, but you're bang on. Switching back to you personally, because I would say I always try and get kind of into the people that I've got as guests in a bit more detail. You've talked about your kind of development, where you've got to. Role models, people that you've really looked up to as you've gone along and maybe still do, and anybody out there that you'd single out?
I'm going to break it up. I guess if we were to think about in terms of academic learning and that sort of thing, someone who I really love all his work is Covey. I love his books, really resonates with me. Um,
What, the older one or the younger one?
well, I don't know. I don't know the younger one's work as well, if I'm honest.
Yeah, yeah.
But Stephen
I think Seven
Covey,
Habits of Highly Effective People is my favorite book from a leadership
yeah,
point of view. It's
same
absolutely
with
brilliant.
me.
Yeah, brilliant
Yeah,
book.
it's excellent. It's just excellent. There's also, obviously, from a psychological perspective, a couple of people there. But on a personal level, um, if I were to really think about it, I hate to sound cliche, but probably my parents, both in different ways. My mum probably in her commitment to family, and my dad in terms of work and business, the ability to be clear in your vision, work towards what you want in a way that is methodological, that is intentional, to use your time really carefully, and to be just to be straight, to say what you think what you say, and not to cut out the games and the small talk and that sort of thing, and just to kind of do what you believe in, and you can do whatever you put your mind to.
Mhm. Yeah, fascinating. I mean, I think most people are shaped by their parents when you've got them there, isn't it? And it's interesting if you haven't got them. I mean, my dad died when I was very young, which I've always thought was, I mean, it's obviously tremendously sad in a number of different ways. But from a career development point of view, as I've gone through my own Air Force journey, because he was an Air Force wartime pilot, World War II pilot. And I've often reflected. I wonder what my dad would have thought, when I've got promoted or I've got a particular job or whatever. And so, yeah, they definitely shape you. They have to, don't they? And conversely, of course, my mum had a really tough job because she was a single mum in the '60s, which was
Right.
not easy. And she did an amazing job in terms of giving me the best possible start. So I would firmly lean on, if I was answering my own question, I'd be looking back probably at my mum as a major shape in my life for sure. And I
Yeah.
totally get that.
Yeah.
Highs and lows is something I always tend to talk about, and because everyone's got them, regardless of how long or short your journey's been, I suppose. But I think the before we get to that, is there anything that you would do differently when you look back already in terms of what you've done, or are you kind of content with your lot?
I'm pretty content. I don't think I would have done anything differently. I think I probably could have maybe believed in what I could do a little earlier.
Hmm.
I think it's quite difficult when I came into this industry to know your worth in what you do. And it's someone said to me when I was very young, and I'll always be grateful to them, but when I first started looking into corporate world, and they said to me, you don't realize your value to the corporate world being someone who has a background in teaching, education, and psychology. It's very unique. And I didn't really, the gift of being young, I didn't really like understand. But I think as I'm um getting older, I guess I think what would be good, what is helpful is it goes back actually to where my value is that I said at the very beginning, is believing in yourself and believing in what you do, and what you can do. It's a journey. I have actually written a book of how to get there a little quicker, but I haven't done anything with it yet. Um, but I'm going to try to do that this year.
Yeah, I think it's such a relevant point, isn't it? Because I think that is true for an awful lot of people. I mean, interestingly, at the other end of the scale for me, I mean, I left the military after 35, almost 35 years. And when I was looking at what I was going to do next, I definitely did struggle a bit. I've talked about it on podcasts and things as well, where I was, when I was working for Deloitte, which is what I did straight after I left, I'm going, am I actually credible adding value here to, the clients that I'm working for? I mean, they're paying director level rates for me. This feels as though they might not be getting the best deal ever. And of course, actually, when I had the conversation with the clients, they're going, no, you're totally wrong. When you look at what you've done and your background and your experience, and you're bringing a different view and blah, 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 blah. So I think perception is really, really important in that space, isn't it? And I think a lot of people probably hold the same view to the one you've just expressed, and particularly when
Yeah.
relatively early on, if you've started out somewhere. I do. Interesting to digress for a second back to what we were talking about a minute ago. If you've got quite a flaky career, and as when you're diving around into different areas, the risk, I guess, is that you become even more challenged in that space. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. I've done 15 different things by the time I'm 30. Am I actually, going to be able to really bring that together to be something useful? And the answer is, of course, you are, but it's then focus, isn't it? It's deciding how you're going to take that forward, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what's really important is, and that's why I say I spent a lot of time thinking about the commonality and the vision. And for me, there's something about optimizing human potential. And there are lots of environments that feel important to do that in. So I think if you've got a different vision in each space you're working in, that can become quite conflicting. But across the board, the skills I'm developing are the same, and the humans are the same. They're dressed different. The room might be fancier in some places than others, but the ability to get beneath the surface, articulate it back in a clear, coherent way, present it in a clinic room, in a therapy room, in a workshop to hundreds of people. The skill is the skill. So I think as long as you know what you're trying to develop across the board and it's consistent, for me, that's what brings it together.
Mm. No, it makes great sense. What's the high point for you then, career wise, so far?
I don't know. I mean, I've obviously ended up speaking at so many places and done so many things that I think, oh, what's little old me doing here? It's quite cool. But probably, I think that stuff doesn't faze me so much. I suppose the most meaningful parts for me have been alongside all of my studies. I also built my family, so I've really blessed to have three kids. And I've had really difficult pregnancies with hyperemesis, which is like really violent sickness. So I'm pretty bedbound for most of it. So I think the ability to study, I've basically studied in all my maternity leaves, and it's all been alongside each other. So I think that feels like that feels quite cool. Like when I graduated from my master's at Cambridge, my graduation picture is a really special one for me because I'm holding he must have been about one, holding my 1-year old at my Cambridge graduation. That felt, and then for each one of my qualifications, I basically have had another child, really blessed and privileged, but it's been
That's,
really tiring.
I was going to say that's true multitasking, isn't it? That's pretty impressive. So
Yeah,
thanks.
yeah. I like to be like, I always say I'm like one of my children. He gets a bit disruptive when he's bored. I'm similar. So I love learning and I love studying. I've got more studies that I want to do. I just don't have the time right now, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah, you are not short of academic qualifications. Looking at
It's not, for
your
me, it's not
back,
about the qualifications. It's about the interest areas.
the journey. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
just like I'm so curious. I think particularly like the brain and things like that. It's so amazing.
Mm.
So I've got genuine curiosity about these things.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, conversely, obviously, for every high, there's got to be a low. So, what's the low point, and what did you take from it?
It's probably the same thing. Being my pregnancies are really difficult. Like my last one, I was in bed for 5 months on a drip twice a week to keep me hydrated because I don't take
Wow.
any food in. I'm really not very well. And alongside that, I can't work, but I've got, so many different things that I do. So the ability to actually let go of everything, focus on my health, and try not to become iller by the thought of all of the things I'm not doing, the commitments I'm not following through on, all of those sorts of things, and focus on my health in that time, I think is probably my biggest challenge. Yeah, 3 times over, been my
Yeah,
biggest
well,
challenge.
credit to you for putting yourself through it as well. In that sense, if you kind of knew it was going to happen that way, blimey, that's properly self-inflicted.
I
Yeah.
know, it really is. They're worth it. They're very cute.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that's true. I mean, we've touched on the next question before a little bit in the context of other people, but for you, and not least with what you just said, work-life balance. I mean, some people don't like the term, but I mean, just in terms of health, well-being, what do you do to kind of de-stress and relax? And I guess, what do you advise other people to do as well? And do you drink your own Kool-Aid?
Really, really good question. I say the first thing to acknowledge when it comes to work-life balance is whenever you're winning at something, you're failing at something else. So if you're winning at being at home, you're failing be big on your emails and responding really quickly. If you're winning at doing a great work commitment, all day, then you're failing at doing your drop off and pickups and cooking dinner yourself. And I think that it's not about work-life balance isn't about winning at everything. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up to fail and to feel rubbish about yourself because it's unrealistic. I think what's really, really important is to pick the areas that you win at and pick the areas that you fail at strategically, again, in a way that's aligned with your vision. And that will depend on what your commitments look like, if you have a family, or if you've got commitments to yourself or your well-being. And it's about if I were to speak for myself, which what you've asked me, I've got a range of a toddler to a young teenager. They have different needs. When I had little ones, it was really important. I did my best to be home between 4 and 7, but it was very easy to then pick up work from 7 onwards because everyone was asleep. And my teenager wants to start chatting to me at like 11 o'clock at night, and I can't even, everyone needs me at a different time. So it's about looking at your week really intentionally and thinking, where am I going to use my time in a way that I feel is prioritized for me and my commitments? And you will not do everything perfectly. You'll win at some things and you'll fail at others. But if you've chosen the areas that you're not winning in and you prepare for them, and people know, look, I'm not here because I'm doing that, and that's really important, then everyone can accept that better. That's the first thing. On a personal level, for me, what feels good for me, I have a detox from my phone and from technology once a week for a day. Um, my phone does not go on, my emails do not go on, not even TV in my house. It is a conversation
Oh
day.
wow. Is that
Playing,
a
talking,
specific day of the
chatting.
week or
It will be usually be on the weekend. And I think that it's really, really important to have switch off time. Um, I also think movement is really important. So I try to fit in some walks, um, when I can, exercise, workouts, but I can't say I'm the best at that. But at the minimum, to try, if I'm doing a phone call, to take a few of the phone calls on a walk with me. And I'll always say, do you mind if I just walk while we're on this call? And people understand, I think that's really important to move. And the other thing is to eat well, to nourish ourselves. I don't know if you know the term hangry, but I get really hangry, which is,
yeah.
when I'm hungry, I just get angry. So, I just, especially before I go pick up my kids, I try and eat something so I don't go hangry, because otherwise I've got no patience for anyone. So it takes you back to basics, right? I think it's just like, obviously, the eating, the sleeping, the moving, and having tech downtime.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Some great tips in there, and I think you're right. And if you're doing them yourself, that's always a good thing as well, because it's clearly some people are great at providing advice. You then say, "Would you do that yourself?" And I'm guilty of that
Listen,
some of
I
the.
try. I have to tell you, I'm no expert. Like there, for example, I think it's amazing for people to not sleep with their phones in their rooms.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I find that difficult. I need to work on that. I don't have this down to a T, and I don't speak from a place of judgment or having this all sussed. But this is what I'm striving for.
Yeah, yeah, aim high, absolutely. Um, I always tap sort of wider stuff with guests as well. We've talked some of the thing that I really wanted to get to about youngsters, but this is going to probably link back to the youngsters because you mentioned it at the beginning. I mean, you worked in prisons. I mean, do you still work in prisons? First question, I guess. But
No.
your I'm interested in your perceptions of that because it's a societal thing where obviously, there are some really big challenges around prisons. They get a terrible press a lot of the time. In terms of overcrowding, in terms of rehabilitation effectiveness or lack of it, and therefore reoffending rates and all those sorts of things. I'd love the kind of good, bad, and ugly of what you saw from inside that system and some of your kind of personal experiences. Because I really admire you for doing it because I think having been in a prison, not as an inmate, I hasten to add, as a visitor when I was in the military, there are definitely places you don't want to be spending too much time. That's very evident. And so working there is a demanding, difficult kind of environment. But your perspectives would be really interesting.
I don't still work there. I worked there for a contained period of time in one prison. And so I guess the reason I'm saying that is to premise whatever I'm going to say with that there's very much my own experience. I can't speak across the whole board of prisons. But I do think from my conversations and my work and my readings and my research that what I say isn't, I wouldn't say it's like an anomaly. Um, I think that it's a really, really tough environment. And I think that the idea of rehabilitation is a really important idea, but it's really challenging. If you think about just even access to therapy and support, there's a massive wait list to get therapy. You get like 6 weeks or something of therapy, and it doesn't really get you that far. You can extend it or you can get a little longer. For some types, there are some sorts of issues that are easier to get help for. So the fellowships program with Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, that is essentially really amazing, effective, free support to help people who struggle with addictions. That's easier to access across the board, and it's probably easier to roll out in places like prison. Therapy and psychologists, it's not an easy setup. It's not an easy setup to work in. It's not good payment, and you need highly skilled people to work with the nature of what you're dealing with. So I do think there are a lot of people that are, offenders and have stuff they need to work through to avoid reoffending. And there isn't the space or there isn't the resource for them to have a safe space to work through. I think that's the reality. I think it's a strain on resource. I don't think that's intentional, but I think that it's a difficult setup.
Is there an obvious way of improving that, in your view?
I don't think it's obvious. Otherwise, I think that it would have been done. I think that the most important, obvious thing, which is why I still work at a nonprofit, really working on this, is prevention. So if you look at the education around, let's say, something like consent, the amount of or coping mechanisms for anger. If children haven't had the opportunity or grown up in an environment where they have learnt about these things, I'm not saying that learning about it would eliminate, but the amount of times I've sat in a room with someone who said to me, I wish someone would have told me this earlier. I just think if we could tell people earlier, if you look even at neurodiversity, for example, the rate of the statistics of men in prison expected to or diagnosed with ADHD is disproportionate. What are we doing to prevent that setup? If you look back at the school system and you look at boys with ADHD who are from backgrounds where they don't necessarily have the privilege of secure attachments, of a language to engage with meaningful education, a safe relationship with adults where it's going to be easy for them to just respect and work well with teachers. That child ends up in trouble after trouble after trouble, kicked out, moved around. They're disengaged. They become more lonely, more vulnerable, more susceptible to being groomed for gangs, looking for validation. That I think what I found is that there are lots of people that struggle, but most people who struggle have one person that pulls them through that believed in them.
Mm.
And that might have been an adult, it might have been a parent, it might have been a religious leader, it could have been a grandparent, could have been an aunt, just one, a teacher. What I found for a lot of people that end up in prison is there wasn't that one person that gave a security or a stability to that person to safeguard them against really poor choices. This is a generalization, and it's probably for a certain level of criminal offence as well. There are other, there obvious this answer can't kind of cover everything, and I don't want to come across as if I'm generalizing and or excusing. I don't think these are excuses. I think this is an explanation for large overrepresented cohorts, for example, that maybe we could look back and think, how could we prevent this from earlier, from school. Not that we can prevent everything, and not that once it's happened, these things are excuses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, and interestingly, that statement that floats around, I'm never quite sure how true it is that, if you're a particularly young male teenager, predominantly you're more likely to be owning a smartphone than you are to have a father figure at home. And if that's true, that is horrific. And you can see why, because obviously, given what we talked about earlier on in terms of influence of social media and access to whatever you can get out on a smartphone, clearly the chances of bad stuff being part of your development experience rather than actually good stuff is very high. So no, I totally get that. I think that makes absolute sense. Challenging area. I mean, linking on from that, I suppose, but away from the prison environment, mental health generally, and again, you touched on this with perceptions around neurodiversity and so on, which I think is more of a topic of conversation these days, perhaps not well enough understood by lots of people, particularly in terms of leadership in workplaces and so on. But mental health generally seems to be, well, not seems to be, it absolutely is a much bigger topic of conversation now than it was when I was in work, for example, earlier on in my career, where frankly, it just wasn't an issue. People did, it was an issue, but people didn't talk about it. It wasn't framed in the same way at all. And I just, from an expert point of view, I just wonder what your perception of that now is. Are we heading towards a better place where we're handling it better and understanding it and dealing with it? Have we gone too far in the other direction where we're a bit too kind of flaky on it and too soft on it in some ways, and we do need to be a bit more realistic about where we are in terms of personal resilience and so on? Or what's your view?
It's a tricky question, and it's two different questions because mental health and neurodiversity are different. They're not the same. So, although there's an overlap,
Yeah, I wasn't trying to conflate them, by the way. I was
no,
just
no,
sort
I
of,
know. I'm just thinking about the answer really differently because I think we're much further along in mental health at work, than we are with neurodiversity. So, a lot of places that I work with neurodiversity, we're seeing a lot more adults getting diagnosed and arriving at work with diagnoses or getting diagnoses with work or through work or at work or on the side, but they're already working adults. And I think that I'm working with more and more HR departments and leaders who don't really know what to do with that. Um, they're now leading a team with ADHD and dyslexia and autism, and they don't know, they don't have that language, and they're not trained in that. They're not psychologists. And I think that particularly in high performing industries, exceptional performers have exceptional brains, right? So I think we will see more people on these sorts of spectrums. I think that in terms of neurodiversity, there is more work to do in terms of empowering leaders with language, skills to, first of all, understand this, but second of all, leverage it. So, yeah, I've got like a training day, for example, coming up because I've done so many talks with so much interest on literally leveraging neurodiversity at work. And it'll be explaining what actually is dyslexia, what's dyspraxia, what's autism, what's ADHD, what's going on in the brain, not a personal lived experience, what's going on in the brain. How can this show up at work in a way that stunts performance? And how can we actually use this in a way as almost like a performance indicator to get better results, to optimize potential and performance? And there are ways of optimizing certain brain types if we understand it. So I think that what would be really helpful for leaders is to skill themselves up about this because I think often they might feel out of their depth and even having a conversation about it. What should I say? What should I not say? Because they're already lost in the terminology. Mental health, um, I think it's really tricky. I think that we now are seeing, loads of mental health first aid courses. We've got people who are feeling much more skilled up on the language. And I think that it's important to be aware, to spot signs early. But I think that the passing along bit feels really, really important. I'm seeing an increasing amount of managers or HR departments falling into the role of therapists. And I don't think that's healthy, not just because work is work, it's not therapy, And so I think it's important to a point, but I don't think that your work are responsible for your mental health and well-being. And it's unrealistic because if let's say you're working in a law firm and your senior partner, he's trained in the law and he should be trained to a point in mental health and awareness and how to pass it along to HR, but they're not therapists. I'm a psychologist and I've studied for years, and so I can help people with these things. So I think there's really important to have bridges to professionals who can help support and to say, look, thanks so much for sharing. We so value that you've been open with us. We're going to find you the right person to talk to, as opposed to trying to deal with it in-house, unless you have an in-house professional, which might well be the future. I work in lots of places that could probably deal with me there full time to deal with it in-house, but I'm trained, that's my job. So I think that's where it becomes a little bit murky, of empowering people to say, thank you for sharing this with me. Let's now pass this over to a space that feels more appropriate in supporting you with that. And we're happy to work with them and take guidance from them. But this isn't my expertise.
No,
Does
I
that
think
make sense?
yeah, it absolutely does. And it's a really important point because I think, interestingly, when I qualified myself as a coach, part of that, the very clear distinction in there was just be really clear in your own mind. This is not therapy, and the moment you stray into that, you need to be absolutely recommending clients and so on to take a different path. And a bridge is a good example there. I think saying putting someone in a position where they've got access to the right kind of help and support for whatever's going on is hugely important. I do agree with you. I think the point that I really resonated with a second ago from what you said is the terminology point. I think for seasoned generation people, to use your term, I think that is an increasing challenge, to be honest, where there is this slight mindset around treading on eggshells. When you're at work, that you constantly think, am I going to say the wrong thing? And it's not just about mental health; it's about all sorts of other things in there, notably transgender stuff and all those sorts of things. Where I think that or sexuality and equality and diversity generally, all these kind of areas are minefields for people who have been grown up in a world of work and just a world of life which has had a very, very different approaches to them. And I think it's not surprising that stuff goes wrong. And I don't think, back to your point of earlier on as well, I don't think it's intentional often. I think it's just that actually people are unaware. I was going to say ignorant, but that's too strong a word. Unaware, clumsy, thoughtless, too emotionally responsive in the moment to necessarily get it right. And I think that's a really, really big factor for lots of people.
Yeah, and I would say as well that there's something really important for me when it comes back again to the authentic curiosity, the humility, and the collaboration, that there's this misconception that work needs to be responsible for your well-being. And I sit with so many leaders and C-suite who will say, we've done our well-being survey and it's really concerning what's come back from the young generations. Their scores are really low. And so we're determined to make that a target for this year. And I'll say, oh, so how are you going to fix the well-being of thousands of young people in your business? And you can introduce whatever initiative you want. You can introduce no work on, stay at home 2 days a week, flexi working, casual clothes on Fridays, pizza Friday, snooker table, bring your dog to work. You can introduce all those things. That's not going to fix anyone's well-being. And the reality is I think and I see it in schools as well, we're living in a time where there's so much expectation on other people to fix us. And actually, when it comes to well-being and mental health, I'm a very big believer in taking ownership as an adult, if one is healthy and well enough to do this, of their well-being. So if well-being scores are low, it's so important that has come to our awareness. And now we all need to collaborate and be curious as to why that is, so we can work on this together. Now, it might be because of tech habits. It might be because of scrolling before bed and not sleeping well. It might be because people are confused that being uncomfortable means I'm not happy, and to be well, I have to always be happy. it might be we need education around what well-being actually is, because being well sometimes means being uncomfortable, because that's, like you asked me about my best moment at my worst, they were the same thing. And being comfortable isn't what's going to make us happy. There's a level, obviously. I'm not suggesting people should be desperately uncomfortable, but there's something, no one ever got fit without the pain of working out, or passed an exam without the pain of revising. Didn't enjoy it, but had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's something about this blurring of boundaries of ownership and accountability that feels really important to me. And my colleague Beth, who I work with, we spent a lot of time thinking with businesses of, it is a risk that these wellbeing scores have come up, but mitigating that risk can't all be on you. Where's the education and the understanding for those that are struggling about what wellbeing actually is and how they can take ownership over that as best they can and ask you for help when it's needed?
Mm-hmm. No, perfect. Great answer to almost close a really terrific interview. I normally ask two questions at the end, and one of them is about what's the most memorable event of your life, and I think you've already answered that. So I'm gonna skip that and go straight to the very last one, which is, what's the most difficult question you've ever been asked?
Oh gosh. I think that intellectual questions aren't normally that difficult, because I always fall back on curiosity and collaboration. So if I don't know the answer, I don't mind, because we can work together in getting there. I think the most difficult questions, and again, sorry to take this really personal, which is not what I usually do at all. It's probably, and more and more recently, as the world's becoming more and more globalized, from my children, answering questions around racism, discrimination, anti-Semitism, as they hear about attacks that go on around the world. And I want to tell them about it so they're not surprised or shocked if they hear about it from their friends, because you know how kids chatter away or they see it on social media. And, like my son, and I've heard this question from all my kids, but my son, he just said to me the other week, but why would people kill somebody just because of their religion or because of where they were born? And I find that how do you answer that?
Really
When you
tough.
try to explain prejudice or, to little people, little kids who are so logical and so they've not been ruined yet by the biases of life. It's just so logic. It's like, I don't know, darling. It's just
Yeah, so
how the
they're
world
quite
is.
black and white, aren't they? Probably at that age as well, as
Yeah.
opposed to shades of grey. Yeah, because it's definitely, the world's full of shades of grey.
Yes, I think that's probably because I guess if I don't know the answers myself, it's hard to explain, isn't it?
Yeah. Hey, Liz. Well, I mean, I'm very pleased that I've survived nearly an hour and a half's worth of interview with a psychologist, and I actually feel okay at the end of it. B, what a set of fascinating insights. I knew it was going to be a really great conversation, and I think so many really, really helpful bits of advice in there for all sorts of people across the spectrum that we've been talking about. So I'm extremely grateful to you. Thank you very, very much indeed, and I
Thank
wish you well with all
you.
you do.
No, thank you for having me. It's been so great talking to you. I want to interview you back now and hear all of your thoughts on all this.
Gotta do that another day.
Another day.
Thanks very much indeed. Bye now.
See you. Bye bye.
I really hope you've enjoyed this fascinating conversation with Dr. Liz. I think she's got so many terrific insights and terrific input to a very, very important conversation that affects pretty much everyone in the workplace, because the workplace is changing, and we talked about all of that, and I think you will hopefully have gained some real insight you probably didn't have in terms of your own kind of thinking around some of these things as much as anything else. If you have and you found it valuable and useful, please share it. Please make sure you subscribe, you follow, you do all those usual things to boost the algorithms and the work within those to turn around and boost the podcast. And also think about actually commenting and giving me some feedback and all those other things too, because it all helps. And if you find it really valuable and you're up for a bit of financial support, then please do financially support the podcast through Patreon. You'll find the financial support link in the show notes for this, whether you're on YouTube or on a podcast platform. And it will make a world of difference to me if you join at one of the levels that's there, because these things obviously take time, they cost money, and if you're able to help me out a little bit, that would really, really be helpful. And it's pretty cheap, cup of coffee a month. So just have a think about it. And I would be very, very grateful to you. But either way, really, really appreciate you listening. Very grateful to you. Thank you very much indeed. And we'll see you again very soon. Bye now.